Hello, welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. It is February. We're in February. I always find that word really hard to say. February. We're in February, and we are post bet. Actually, post bet. There's no Schrodinger's cat moments where we're recording this before bet, after bet. Not even sure what it is. Yeah, mate. It's been. We saw each other last week quite a lot. Which was nice. But how's your week been? How's your weekend been? How's it been leading up to today?
Good. I have a really really good, really intense, mega busy. A lot of follow-ups and trying to get those bits in, Joe, from the conversations at Bet. And I thought Bet was really intense as I was going around and everything else. But normally Bet, there's a bit of a lull and I can relax a little bit more. It's been long days. So I was at the Leeds University Business School event talking about networking and a lot of research that they're developing in regards to conducting of teams, but also network. When you say social networking, not online, but also how you can build those networks in teams and organizations. So I've been thinking about the business that I'm now involved in, of how we connect those bits of an online business, how there's no outliers and making sure everybody's got 1 or 2 points of connection. And it isn't, I'm not the linchpin. But one thing, the confession I'll make is myself, you and our guest today, that is the only time I have run. We ran at Bet, and that is the only time I've run in the last week. I've not done any other exercise, and I feel terrible for it. And I'm not looking after myself, which I've made a promise I would this year. Because I didn't book Manchester Marathon, because it was too expensive, and as a Yorkshire man, I'm so tight. Literally, my target is gone, so I need to get a target in my head of I'm working towards that, because it really...
You need to go and do that Leeds one again. You know, you love that Leeds Marathon.
It broke me last time. It broke me, though. But I think I might commit to it. I think it's the hardest thing I've done. That 2 miles uphill, if anybody knows Otley, 2 miles uphill, just coming off the back of the half marathon, or 2.5 K, was probably the hardest climb I've ever done. And I might as well have walked. It just, the rest of the marathon was just a pointless exercise, really.
We doing that dad run
down the
where
mile.
you feel like...
when you're like shuffling to get to the dance floor, like the getting to the dance floor dance before you get to the dance. I was basically doing that. I almost was going backwards. There was a snail on the road that actually beat me up the hill, which is always an interesting challenge when you're going up there. But I need to get back into that bit as well. And looking at, as Action Jackson says, and a great person that hopefully we're going to have on the podcast pretty soon, is make sure you what's your why, fill your cup up, family, which I know you share that value, Ben, but also looking after myself and being my best self for everything, not just work. But yeah, how's early morning swims, mate?
Not been too bad this week. I played squash this morning early, which was there was no early morning swim responsibility today, but we went for that. But today is a significant day in the Whittaker household, because me and the wife have been together 20 years today. So it's not a 20-year anniversary, but it's as in from meeting, so 20 years. And so we went out for lunch to celebrate. It's difficult when you got kids, but Amanda's off today. So we went out for lunch and took an extended break to be able to go and do that. So that's lovely. And
you met in primary school, years... Ben? You met in primary school?
Well, something like that. Yeah. 20 years, and it's been a ride, man. It's been a ride. It's been fun, but we've got there, and there's not many people. This is the truth of it, right? There's not many people that do. There's a lot of people don't, for all different types of reasons. So we're celebrating that today, and she must be an absolute saint to have put up with me for 20 years. So
I'm 5 years in. And I'm looking for the exit. I'm all joking, but no, fair play to Mrs. Whittaker. For sure, absolute legend. She is an absolute legend. So I know she listens every now and again, and she's a big advocate of the podcast. So fair play, well done. Please give us tips how to survive, Ben, for those friends who've known him for a long period of time. Should we get the guest on? Should we get the one of the running trio from Bet?
Yeah, let's bring him in.
Hey. I wouldn't call myself running trio, you know. That I was put on the front when I was running with you guys. There's so much pain, but keep going.
Weren't we all? Was it that running bravado where everybody just didn't want to admit that we were running too fast?
Well, that I'm not going to lie to you. I said, we're going to do a 5K. We'll do it gentle. I came out of my hotel room, and Lawrence is walking out of the hotel room, and he's like, are you going for a run? I'll come and join you. I was like, yeah, we're meeting up with Steve. So we ran to your hotel. I'm thinking to myself, this is quite an all right pace. Not too fast, but it wasn't too slow. We got to your hotel, and then we decided we're going to carry on. And I was like, lads, thinking to myself inside, lads, you know there's this little fat bloke behind you, right? Who's still trying to keep up with you.
We talked about on the run. The only you guys are like, Lawrence, you go to the gym at crazy o'clock in the morning. Your day's so intense. Like, you get up and you're like, I follow you obviously on social media and Instagram, and we've known each other a long time now. And I'm like, that guy's he's looking fit, man. Ben, to be fair, you in terms of squats and all the other stuff and strength, absolutely got it. I'm just a gazelle. Ultimately, I just have the ability to run. The problem is I don't look after myself. So I end up after 6 months of running like that, my back just goes because I just don't do anything else. So you guys are probably will be longer in the game. But how was CEO of Jag, by the way, loving the title? How was it all going? How was Bet for you? Let's start there.
Bet. I think I've still got a bit of bet lag. I can't coin that phrase. That's come from someone else that I've used. So whoever's used it, right, you can copyright that. But just recovering, I think when I got in, I was just like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to talk. Don't want to speak. But then I remember actually something you actually said, Ben, about being with your wife for 20 years. I remember a promise I made to myself of like, how do I be the best version for my family when I get back in after an event? So I kind of was like, on the way home, right, make sure you engage, you speak to your wife. It's not her fault that you've been at an event for 4 days having to network and talk and you feel talked out, that your social coins are all finished. So literally got in and was like, gave her a hug, gave the little one a hug too, and sat and had a really decent conversation. It was such a good conversation. I fell asleep downstairs. I don't remember when I fell asleep. So
it wasn't mid-conversation, was it? It wasn't mid-conversation. It wasn't mid-conversation.
No, I hope not, but it was all right the next day. So I think it was like a really good conversation.
You'd have known if you hadn't. To be fair, you'd have known right now. You'd have got to dig in the ribs. I'm sure if your missus is like my ribs, that wouldn't have happened.
Interesting on that. But on that thing, I was telling Amanda about something that I was doing work-wise. And she regularly says, "What do you actually do?" And I ask myself, "What do I actually do?" But I was talking to her. We were in bed the other night, and we were talking about. I was telling her about something to do, and she went, "Do you know what? I now know when I'm struggling to sleep, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you what you do for work. That'll send me straight to sleep." I'm like, "Oh, that's one, babe. I love you too."
Right.
So
you want people to listen to this podcast. So you trying to tell everybody that you're boring, and me saying I don't know what I'm talking about isn't really. We should put on our strapline for Edufuturists. Come and listen to a boring man and a person who doesn't know what he's talking about every week.
I love that. I'm sure both of you do know what you're talking about, but if it's any consolation, Ben, I get the same thing when people ask Sheridan, what does Lawrence do? She's like, looks at me like, help. And I'm like, actually, no, this is great. I'm gonna watch you and see you describe what I actually do. She's getting there. She's getting there.
It used to be a teacher. That's the easiest thing to say. It used to be a teacher. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. So you obviously you're at Bet, and for those people who don't know, at Bet you looked after the Google Teaching Theatre amongst other things, and you had a team of wonderful people who were speaking and sharing the stage there at the Google Teaching Theatre, yeah, and you also won an award at the Google Partner event, didn't you, as well? So well done on that. And we talked about that a little bit. And I know we'll get into that conversation as we go through the session. And, last time we had you on the podcast, we were talking about all the wonderful work you've done and are doing in that space around diversity, equity, inclusion stuff, all sorts of levels. But you also were mid-releasing a documentary or about to release a documentary that kind of, you might think, oh, that was ages ago. So I wondered if you'd just give us an update on where that went, how that's gone, what kind of came out of what you did as a documentary, a little bit about what it was about.
Yeah, it's mental to kind of think that it's nearly a year next month since we released it officially. I say we because I had some talented young people who helped film it. It's been a whirlwind since releasing that documentary. I say to people, it was probably one of the hardest things that I did in terms of up to now of talking about my journey. And actually it was a bit of therapy because there were some bits that I didn't know was still buried in there. So I talk about actually how there was a point in time where I didn't want to be on this earth. That I just thought, let's pack it in, and I didn't realize how much I actually meant that. Like, I think sometimes you say it as a statement, and just hearing me and talking about it, I remember the pain I felt. I remember how useless I felt, but I'm here, and it's been a vehicle to actually engage with a lot of young people. So that's the reason why I actually created a documentary. It wasn't that I've got this massive ego and I was like, achieved so much in my life. It was more of the fact that actually I'm just an ordinary guy trying to make it, and that's kind of what I say to people. And it was to give an insight to young people, particularly, that no matter what setbacks you have, what starting blocks you have, as long as you have the right people and access to the right networks, you can overcome anything, you can achieve anything. And it was hard for me to be that vulnerable, but it was well received. So I've been into schools showing a documentary to young people, doing a Q&A with them, and having some really interesting questions. It's got me over to Australia to do a keynote. We're traveling around, and what I'd say is the documentary is just getting started in terms of the impact from it. And it'd be great even just to like get your like quick thoughts. I know you're meant to be interviewing me. Get your quick thoughts on it as well. If you've seen it, that's that awkward moment of like, have I seen it? Do I remember it?
Have. Yeah. I think it's the power of resilience. I would use that word, and I know that word is a buzz phrase in education about resilience, but it gave me a whole new respect for you as a human being, not as a person who is a teacher or somebody who's gone through some of the struggles physically that you've gone through, but just like the fact of when I see on Instagram that you're getting up at 4:30 because you're going to train, or your new role, or as a dad, or speaking in front of other people, I think it just brought a whole level of blooming heck. This fella has battled some stuff, yet he's still standing. Didn't want to be here, and both of us who were sat, all of us who were sat on this call, it's been difficult at times when you feel like that mental health challenge, and we've all been very open about how that is a tough place to navigate, and so that ability to be vulnerable and tell your story, I think. It massively landed for me to see that level of turning that. And I know that it's obvious because the title of it is about from pain to purpose. For me, that idea of grabbing hold of something that was intended to be, or was something that was painful and difficult, and to spin that around and to use that for good is like, it really resonated for me. And I think there's a message in that for everybody, that it just we do go through shit, like things happen that we've got no control over, but it's not about what happens to us, it's about what happens in us whilst what's happening to us happens to us, right? So
Absolutely.
that'd be my thoughts on it. Sorry, Steve, I've set you up, probably said all best bits.
You've said I'm in that class just for FCS. No, I think mine is just like the whole the thing I used to say to students, and I'm sure everybody does. It's a case of what I want to happen by the end of this year is that you've been successful despite your challenges, not the reason I have failed is because of this. So don't use it as a blocker to not be able to do something. Use it as something to celebrate even more when you achieve something. And I think everybody does it in different guises. But I think that the message and the whole journey, and I remember at Sweden 19, when we first really spent any time together, Lawrence, and I didn't really know the story and I didn't really know you, but Joe, and ultimately, Joe, there were times there where it was really challenging because that was such a long time. Is that how many years? It was 2019, so I'm just thinking. So that's almost 5. It'll be 5 years ago this year, but let's say 4.5. Where when you were the challenges that you went through in terms of some of your existing and pre-existing health conditions meant that it was much more challenging to present, and I saw that ambition and that drive and that whole thing of I've gone back to I'm going to succeed and I'm going to do this in despite of some of the challenges I've got, rather than use it as an excuse of why I should have never even applied for Sweden 19. And that's the thing that always stands out. And I think that's the message that transcends across any age, any gender, across anything and any nation globally, that you will do it and you will be successful regardless, is my message. It's exciting to see where it comes. Maybe we'll see it at Cannes Film Festival, the next one. Who knows?
Hey, you never know. I'm always thinking 10x and thinking big. And I think it was important to ask that question to you, just for anyone who is listening to this, of that's the reason to go and watch it. You know, I can sit down here and, you know, blow my own trumpet about the documentary, but that's literally why I created it, to, you know, hopefully inspire people through kind of my pain and my journey. And I'm still standing. You know, I thought I was going to break into song there.
just on that, because you mentioned, and I think Benji mentioned, traveling. I think it was yourself actually, traveling to Australia. Do you know, if you follow Lawrence on Instagram and you're lucky enough to do so, you'll seen the pictures and I was setting and it was raining. We'd had about 3 weeks of rain constantly in England at the time. I was like, brilliant. I don't know, when rain has never ended, he's stood next to the Opera House or whatever. How did that come about? Not over what come about, but what an amazing journey to get to that point.
Yeah, I was actually saying this when I got approached to see if it was feasible with me going to Australia. I was like, what? Really? Like, boys like me, of course I'm not a boy anymore, but people like me don't get to go to places like that for work. Like, I'm being honest, like I grew up on a council estate in Bermondsey. So I said a boy from Bermondsey is going international, baby, you know. And there was a massive imposter syndrome that kicked into that, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But it came about, and I was actually thinking about this, is being my authentic self. I think that's something I've really focused on in the last year, of leaning into who I actually am and what makes me me and what makes me special. And I'm going to use that term special because I believe everyone is special. You know, we don't like to call ourselves special. We like to say, hey, I'm just okay in this little box. And they had heard my story, Jim Seal, and he was like, look, this is such an important message. How do we get you over to Australia? You know, how do we get your message to our educators? You know, because like you said, Ben, resilience seems to be a buzzword, but he kindly said you embody resilience, you know, with everything you've been through. And I really want that message to go to our educators in Australia and help them in terms of what they're going through, because we know it's a difficult time for teachers, right? So yeah, when they said, yeah, you're going to Australia, and I told my wife, she was like, really, you're going to Australia? I like that for you, but I don't like that for myself, because we've got a 14 month, and he's still not sleeping through the night. So that's the first thing she kind of responded to. I was like, hey, you do understand, like, this is like international? And she was like, oh yeah, I'm really sorry. No, I'm really happy for you. And I was actually hesitant about taking that flight and going to Australia, because I wasn't sure my body was going to be able to hold up. There was something about, you know, if you've ever flown to Australia, it's quite taxing, and you know, I was there for 7 days, and my worry was, what if I have an attack? Touch wood, I've not had one for nearly 7 years, but what about if I have an attack? What about if I have a chronic pain flare up? Like I'm on the other side of the world, no one's there, and I was really nervous about it, you know. And I was like, come on, Lawrence, like you've got this, you know. What's the worst that can happen? You end up in hospital, but you've got travel insurance, you'll be okay. So I almost didn't take it because of that. And then I kind of had to go like, hey, you tell other people to take risks, take chances and stuff like that. You got to look yourself in the mirror and give yourself the same talk. So, but yeah, it was great, and it was amazing to see a different culture out there as well. And yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, sorry, I was just about to jump in, Steve. Sorry, it's just that idea of it's not even about I've been in Australia, although that's like proud moment, like amazing. It's not even just that somebody has requested you and wanted you specifically, which obviously there's a huge honor in that, and I know that you know that's a blessing. But you've worked hard to get there, for starters. But it's the fact that people want you to tell your story, and it's not like we need somebody who can do this product or has got this skill set or has got. It's about Lawrence being asked for Lawrence and Lawrence's story, and I think that's the bit that's really powerful, that you've got that bit's coming in there. So I suppose for those people who maybe don't know, Lawrence, you went to speak at the Google Champion Symposium over there in Sydney, and what did you talk? Was it that you were talking through your documentary, or talking through the story from your documentary, or was there what did you do while you were there?
Yeah, that does make sense to explain what I did while I was out there. I wasn't just, chilling on the beach. So essentially, I was out there talking about building resilient champions in your network. So it was a mesh of like my story, the journey I've been to, but equally how I've turned it into my purpose, and how I've started to advocate for other people, and how we can all do that and champion other people. Hence, whether it was a Google Champion Symposium, but actually championing people. What does that look like? What does that mean? And I think for me it was this quote, and I might get it wrong, is that empowerment is not giving people power, it's untapping the power that already exists. And I think that just sat with me quite like a lot of that. Sometimes we feel we have to give people power, but actually people have that power that just hasn't been tapped into, hasn't been, unleashed essentially. And even just thinking about how I champion people, there's something that I spoke to someone last week, and I was like, that's such a brilliant idea. And it's something that I'm going to do now. If I keynote anywhere, if I talk anywhere, I won't do that session again, essentially, at that event, unless it's a couple of years later. What I will do is pay it forward to someone else to keynote at that event, because actually it's something I mentioned before. If you're looking for talent in the same place, it's like going to the same watering well and expecting to get new water. It's the same water you're going to get from there. So I think it's about championing people, and I think that's part of my mission this year, of like, how can I elevate other people on the platform that I've got? It might be a small one, but I think it's important to do.
Yeah, we go back to just to skip on to that in terms of champion people. Two people, I think I mentored both of those people. Nothing to do with me in terms of how they got to the teaching fair. It's all on you, in fairness, and them. But Conrad Taylor and Marie Kay. Conrad is probably one of my favorite, nicest people I've ever met when I was in education. Still, one of my favorite people. You listen to that guy, you can't not be happy. You literally, you spend time with that individual, and ultimately, your life's better for it. He's a wonderful individual, and I think it was just before I joined T Learning. So let's say it'll be 3 years ago this year, between now and July. I mean, you reached out to me, Lawrence, and you said, I'm doing the diversity trainers thing, and I was like, okay, is there any how can I help? And I think it was that way. And you said, we're looking for coaches, and I was like, I'm more than happy to do it. If I'm honest, probably not from the most diverse background looking at me, but I said, if there's anything I can do, I'm more than happy to share my insights and everything else. And I believe both of those both people were in my little cohort, in my little mentoring group. I absolutely loved it, and I learned so much from those individuals, because Marika was from more community. She'd been out of education, she'd been doing some stuff, but to see them supporting you, because I know you were behind the scenes pulling all the strings, and them kind of leading their bits on the teaching theatre and pulling together was really good to see. Because in education, I honestly believe probably one of the people that hasn't had a voice as much in FE is Conrad Taylor. I think he's absolutely ridiculously good. Absolutely ridiculously good.
Steve, and I couldn't echo that anymore. Like, Conrad is my right-hand man. Like, he's just a guy. You know, like literally, I'm probably giving my title. You know, but what I mean by that is he's someone who's had nearly 20 years of experience in FE, right? 20 years, and why is it we're not hearing about him? It's only now, and I think that's the bit. Is sometimes people think that championing people is people that are starting out new in their career. It's not essentially that. It's people who are actually doing these amazing things, and actually, how can we shine the light on them? So for me, it's one of the things that I did take from Bet that actually gave me hope was actually seeing a lot of people that had come through the diverse edtech trainer cohorts delivering at Bet. That was heartwarming, just seeing them there. And I'm not saying that that's because of me, but owning it and delivering on stage and smashing it like they belong there. So I think it's about that whole thing is going back to elevating talent and giving people a chance to showcase what they can do.
Because ultimately, we can talk about the diversity program, but the proof's in the pudding. If that program actually works, the only way to do that is to demonstrate growth. And I'm not saying that that's without challenges, because it has to be people selecting that talent. So people selecting those people and making the decision to have them on the stage or have them doing activities. But the way that we can demonstrate the power of potentially the impact of that program is through individuals like that. Because it's not about, like ultimately, you put Conrad anywhere near anything and he'll smash it. Absolutely. I think it's just not had the opportunity. And like I say, I speak from experience because I've known Conrad for a long, long time when I was in further education. Absolutely ridiculous. You know what? Not just good, but just, do you know when you spend time with somebody, you just go, that guy's just a good guy. That guy's just a good guy. And if you listen to the podcast and you don't like Conrad Taylor, speak out. No, this is not an anti-Conrad, but I don't think that there's many people out there because he's such just a genuinely nice, kind person. And ultimately, he's also awesome at his job as well.
Yeah. And like when I was at the last FE college I was in, I reached out. You put me in contact with Conrad and said you want to speak to Conrad because there's some stuff he's doing that you definitely want to have a conversation with him about. And I never met the guy from Adam. Like you knew him because you've been in that space before. Lawrence, I don't know how you knew him, but you knew him. He knew me from no one, but because Steve had said, I tell you what, I reached out and he gave me all sorts. Like he literally gave me programs. He gave me the way that he supported staff. He gave me booklets. He gave me like support documents, but I'd never met the guy. So, I absolutely echo that sentiment as somebody who is less connected to him than both of you two were, and Conrad is just, the truth is that Conrad is a very special man, but he's one of probably hundreds of thousands of people that work across the education space whose voice doesn't get heard. Many people who are listening will know that I've been working on these cards, these kind of like reflection cards that are part of a book that I'm trying to release. That's not a plug. It's not a shameless plug. I think Lawrence might be trying to dig some out there. I sent Lawrence some. But one of the questions that I ask in these cards is, there they are. Look at that promo. Thanks, mate. Just DM me if anybody wants to have a conversation about them. But the principle, one of the cards is whose voices do you need to listen to that will give you a different perspective on what you're trying to achieve. And it sounds really obvious thing, but when you sat in a group table, and if you're in an echo chamber, and that happens all the time, the people that you're expecting to hear, the people that you're around, whose voices do you need to listen to that give you a different perspective? And that is not necessarily the traditional rules around diversity. It likely is that, but it's not the only thing, is it? It's about who are the people that are not in this room that need to be in that room. We both heard Sammy talk about like speaking people's voices in rooms that are in that room, and that is it. And that is about people who are different from us, whatever that difference and diversity looks like. So, Conrad, we speak your name in a room, but you've been doing that for a long time. And who else? Who are the other people's names that we need to speak into a room? Is essentially, I suppose, the message that Just a Guy's about, and the work that you've done tirelessly or behind the scenes for a while, Lawrence, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've got something here of Conrad should be one of your next guests on the podcast, so we can amplify him.
We have
even more.
100% had him on. We had him, but it was when he'd won the award. Was it not this year? Last year, we definitely want him back on. Make that happen,
Yeah.
Lawrence. You're the man.
Definitely. Yeah,
get
I
it done.
definitely will do. I'll tell him he needs to get on here. And just on that bit with diversity and inclusion, I think it's a balance, because I remember being approached last year, and I didn't really know this gentleman, and he'll remain nameless. He came up to me at an event and was like, "Hey, you're Lawrence, right?" I was like, "I am Lawrence," you know. And he was like, "I'm looking for a diverse speaker to speak at my event." And I was like, "Oh, interesting." And I remember probably a couple of months before that, someone had approached me in roughly the same manner. I turned up to the event, and I had this massive bout of imposter syndrome, because I turned up to the event, I looked around, I was like, I see what's going on here. I see what's going on here. That I am the only token representative there. And the reason why the imposter syndrome really started to kick in is I was like, am I here because of my talent? Am I here because of what I talk about? Or am I just here because of my skin color? And then I put this massive pressure on myself, no one else, on myself, of like, wow, I'm in here. I must deliver a kick-ass talk. And I need it to nail, because I don't want to be the person who's been given a chance that flops and then spoils it for other people coming behind me. And I promised myself I'm never going to put myself in that position again, because I hated that talk. I couldn't wait to get out of that room. So I said to him, no, I can't do it. And so I think it's sometimes, if you are looking for diverse speakers, see their talent first. That's the most important point, is see their talent first. Don't lead with, I'm looking for diverse speakers because you're telling me I'm ticking a box here, essentially. You know, so I think that's really important, and I thought it was pertinent of me to share that as well.
Yeah, and just on that one, do you feel that that is a step that people are doing? So rather than actually trying to make things, getting people, from all different backgrounds in terms of full diverse offering to really meet the needs of what the people they're speaking to. So, for example, like if you're speaking to the demographic of students, but you've only got a certain demographic, well, ultimately, you're not a true representation of the audience. But do you think that in some instances, and not to criticize, but it's not making the impact because people are seeing it as, well, we have to do that, so we'll like I say, tick that box. Do you think that is a step that of caution, that we have to just be mindful of doing it for the right reasons and getting the best voices there from a diverse background, not just getting that person there just because you have to be ticking the diversity box? If that's coming
I
across where
think no, I hear what you're saying. I think it's definitely not a tick the box exercise, but I think this is the thing, right? You've got to break out of your comfort zone. You've got to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And in terms of what I mean by that is, if I'm got an event and I'm simply just putting it out to the network of people that look like me, everyone's going to be on that event is going to be like me, right? So it's actually, how do I widen my scope? How do I sit in places that are uncomfortable for me? So how can I potentially go to an event that, you know, is representing a different underserved community, and let me listen on that? And the biggest learning curve that was for me is when we run the inclusive trainer community. For once, and I say this, I wasn't talking a lot, because it was about being in that room and listening, because this wasn't my lived experience, from people from different communities as well. Like, I always say to people, I'm not an expert on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I know where my moral compass lies, and I let that be my North Star to guide me, essentially. And actually, when I don't know, I listen and ask questions. You know, that is the most important thing. And that's what I would say to anyone, is ask questions and listen. It's okay to listen and let it sit with you and not have to give a direct response straight away.
I agree, and I think one of the biggest challenges that I have in the edtech, in terms of the speaking, in terms of people speaking at events, in terms of what I see generally across the board. And again, I could be completely wrong, and it might be just my view of it. I see a very young, under the demographic of people delivering. They might be up to our age, but I do not see anybody that is over the age of 55 that is really presenting in that space. And I do at the big talks. I'm not talking about like the big, like like you'll see, like the people who are headline, and that needs to be challenged. But in terms of some of the stuff in regards to teaching, and is that because the teaching population maybe is potentially younger and is becoming younger, and actually that's not a true. The true reflection is that we've got a young generation of teachers. We don't have an aging force of teachers because people are leaving to go into different roles. But I challenged this, when I was delivering an event, that ultimately I said to the FE sector, I said, I'm really interested in hearing the voices of some of those people who weren't. Of EdTech has been a real challenge but they've been successful because they've really challenged that. When people go, well, that person's, that teacher's old, of course they're not going to get it. That, can you remember that old thing of, they're not going to never get EdTech because they're, I think there's a real missed opportunity because there is a demographic of people that maybe avoid it because people talk about, well, that person's over a certain age, so they're not going to get EdTech. Remember the whole Gen Z and like the digital native thing and all this kind of thing. I honestly think that, and I didn't get an opportunity to see, because I can't speak of the teaching theatre and generally bet, because I don't want to say I was too busy, but I didn't get to see the speakers this year. I got to see them on certain bits, but I didn't get to see the demographic of the speeches, so I can't talk on it. But I see that as an issue, that an aging that we are. And I don't want to call out, the EdTech companies, but I go into those bits and I feel old when I go into some of those buildings, because I'm probably one of the oldest people at work. If I join them, I'd be one of the oldest people at work there. What does that say about the people that are 45 and above?
I feel we're missing a real trick, and this is something that I kind of talk about loosely in other bits of life. Is I never say I don't know all myself, and people are like, what do you mean, Lawrence? You never say you don't know all yourself. I'm standing on the shoulders of people that have come before me, and I think that's the disservice we do give to older people in the education sector, is that actually we can learn so much and also empower them. They've got a wealth of knowledge, and we're standing on the shoulders, all three of us, of those people who have been in education before us, and like we have a obligation to also pass that down and pass it forward as well, should I say. So Steve, I totally agree with you. Is how do we engage with them? How do we get them involved? I think it's very short-sighted to write people off because of their age. I think it's short-sighted to write people off because of anything, and it's at our own peril.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that means that we've got to bring the right people into the room, doesn't it? It means that we've got to find the ways to bring the right people into the room, and not based on a tokenism, beyond tokenism. And I think that's really where we're going. And you're talking about championing others. We talked about that idea of it's not hard. This is the bit I find galling a little bit. I think the word is galling, or a little bit frustrating. Is it's not hard to talk about other people. Like, it's not hard to champion other people. Like, some people feel that if you don't talk about who the people, I'm gonna be a little bit out there. I won't mention names. Like, we've all done this now. All three of us have now done this. I am consciously aware of people. One person in particular who has built a platform. And they built that platform, and there's no way they did it on their own. There's a lot of people who have helped them to get to where they are in terms of that, into that space. Yet never mention the journey that they went on. Never talk about the people that helped them. Rarely say thank you. They might say thank you in private, but there's no public acknowledgement of that. I don't think it's hard to speak and acknowledge that we didn't do this on our own. I regularly talk about Al Kingsley being the person who gave me my first paid gig when I came out of education. And that's not like, I'm not just saying that, that's not the first time I've mentioned this on the podcast, like, because I don't understand why people won't talk about the people that have helped them to get where they are. But tied to that, I think there's that bit around, is there a fear perhaps that people will see through people's humanity, or they'll feel like if I speak somebody else's name in there, they might get the gig, and that means I'm not going to get it. I don't know. There might be some of that, and maybe I've done it to my own detriment, but I just don't feel like I can live in that space, if I'm honest, if I don't do that and live with that authenticity around saying I didn't do this on my own. I am standing on other people's shoulders, and I continue to have people that are in my corner shouting my name, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
Do you know what? I'm loving this conversation because it's literally so timely in terms of what I'm going through as an individual. I think what I tend to call those people are gatekeepers. In terms of, you shall pass, you shall not pass. Like, particularly when they've come through that door. And I've used this analogy before on the podcast of, if I'm walking through that door, I'm wedging it open for other people to come through that door, And I think this is what someone said to me ages ago when I first got into when I left teaching and got into EdTech. I'm seeing plenty of work for everyone. And actually, the more you speak people's names, the more it comes back to you, and you're actually growing your network. So actually, you're doing yourself harm in terms of not sharing. And don't get me wrong, I know that there's a business element to it as well, but there are programs and stuff that is going on where it costs you nothing, like you said, Ben, to champion someone. And I think also when we use the word champion, and even we use the phrase, when I say to people, I want to change the world, I get this look of like, what do you mean you want to change the world? In my small little way. That's all it is what can you control in your area to have impact. It's not this big massive thing in terms of changing the world, like, you're going to kill this and do that. We all can change the world in our little way. And just imagine if all of us took that mindset, everyone around the world took that mindset of changing the world just a little bit, would it not make the world a better place? So I think that relates to championing other people. It might just be like, hey, I'm really busy at the moment with a gig. Instead of just saying no, but I can connect you with someone who's doing really well over there, or I'm not the expert. So when people come and say, look, Lawrence, can you come and speak on diversity and inclusion and keynote it? I'm like, oh, not me. I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon. I'm going to talk about what's right and wrong. But actually, there have been people in this industry for years trying to get the light on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which became a buzzword, if I'm being honest, in the pandemic, and people started ticking boxes. So actually, I'm not just going to jump on here and just because I've been quite loud and been quite direct about it and say, hey, right, he's a great speaker to speak on this. No, I am not. I just know what's right and wrong. But actually, here's an expert who's studied it, who's living and breathing it and shining the light on them. So that's what I mean. Not every opportunity is for me.
Yeah, and talk about changing the world. As a dad now, we're all dads on the podcast. Has that heightened your tenacity to want to change it now that you know that you want to leave a positive legacy? But it's not just about you changing it for other people, but ultimately you've got a child in the world now, and does that as a starting point for a conversation in terms of leading conversation about being a dad? Has that changed your opinion? Has that made you more tenacious? Has that changed your drive in any way? Or have you always had it, I guess, to want to change the world?
I think it's made it stronger and it's given me a more resolve, because I think sometimes when you put yourself out there and you talk about things that people don't want to talk about, you second guess yourself with like, should I really post that? Should I talk about that? Am I going to lose followers on that? And I think the thing that I say to myself is, if I lose followers because I feel like I'm talking something that is right and I feel is morally right, then were they even followers in the right place, right? So going back to your question in terms of, being a dad now, I think it's giving me an extra drive of like, I don't want Zeke to go through the same things that I've gone through. And it's also led me to unpack things as well. So I had actually a coaching call yesterday, and I will get onto this, Steve, about Zeke. And it was quite an emotional coaching call where at one point I felt like I just want to end this and get out, because I thought I was gonna start crying, because I had said something about leadership and sometimes not being direct about what I actually want to happen. And I was asked, why is that? And I said, because actually, I remember when I was quite direct about certain things, it would be, you don't need to get angry. That term was consistently used with me, like angry. And I was like, my voice isn't raised or anything like that. So I had to go through a process of thinking, how do I become less intimidating? Which was, take the bass out of your voice, you know, dim your light to make sure other people feel brighter than you. And I was just thinking about that. It's like, I don't want Zeke to go through that. I really don't want him to have to walk into a room and have to create a different persona. So I think that's why, again, I've had this thing of really push about the diversity, equity, inclusion, but also sharing the journey. And let me tell you now, Steve, it's tiring having so many different personas. And I get you have to be a persona for a dad, you have to be a persona for a husband. I get that, but being something that is completely not you to fit in the room is exhausting. It's actually a term called the black fatigue. And I encourage people to go and actually do a Google on what the black fatigue is. So it's made my mission even clearer to be like, hey, how do we create these rooms where everyone is welcome? And I say, when we have made real progress is when we don't have to use those three letters, DEI. Of actually, it's just something that is embedded in everything we do. It's like when we talk about edtech, we shouldn't have to just say edtech. It should be encompassed in our curriculums and everything. And I think, Ben, you mentioned something like this before on a post that I saw as well. And it's the same thing for diversity, equity, and inclusion. It shouldn't be just a thing that is to a side in a policy. It should be wedded in our values and cause of what we are trying to achieve. And it's only good for business, even if you think about it. It's just everyone wins.
I agree. So digital strategy should be really a teaching and learning strategy.
Yep.
Diversity strategy, or whatever you want to brand that as, really should be a people strategy. It should be ingrained in terms of really, if you're talking about your workforce or anything else, that ultimately that's across all of it, and it shouldn't be a standalone thing.
But the thing is about that is that's the should be, isn't it? That's that's the ideal that we're aiming for. And to be able to get there, we do have to elevate and make a point of it. But this should only ever be temporary. But that conversation around this stuff has not been temporary. Digital strategy is still the thing that people are building. Awards for X, Y, and Z are still like the thing that we have to do. But I think we all have a responsibility as educators, as leaders, as thought leaders, as people that have a bit of a platform, whatever size that platform is, to do something about this and talk in a way that is not just saying oh, it's been this way, so it's always going to be this way. We've got to commit to that, I think. And I think we're all on the same page in that sense, that we want to stop having the conversations about EDI, stop having the conversation about digital strategy, because it should just be part of the conversation, is what we're all saying. In order to do that, we get the right voices in the room, the right people around the table, stop having the echo chambers, and actively try and do that. Not jobs for the boys, because that is the biggest challenge has been people. And I've been a victim of this myself. Like I've been on the good side and the bad side of this, where I know I'm the best person to be in that room, and I'm not got picked because of my skin color. I've not got picked because of my gender. I've not got picked because of I like Google and the other people don't like Google. You know, I know that's the truth of it. Like there's things that have been in that space, yet it shouldn't be about. It should be the right people in the right room, the right tools in the right room, and we've got to actively fight to bring that as a normal part of the conversation. Just like it's just normal. It's not a forced thing, right?
Mm. Mm.
So I suppose you were talking there. Steve mentioned to you about being dad. You are. It's a new space. It's a different way. Like you look particularly. It's particularly impressive that you don't look like you're about to die on this call. You know, like 14 months in. Is it 14 months? Is it 14 months in? Do you say?
Yeah.
So like 14 months in and you still haven't yawned once on the podcast. You're still engaged. You're still in. What's your secret, mate?
I go to bed the same time Zeke does.
if I did that, I'd never have any me time. That's the problem. Or do you get up at 4 to get your me time? I guess.
There we go. No, seriously, I literally am in bed at 9:30, and I think let me not lie to you, it's hard, and I'm sure both of you will appreciate it's harder even when you are trying to get this startup going, because as much as I've been around for 2.5 years, I still see it as a startup. And I think the little hacks that I've found is actually I wake up early anyway, generally, is being very productive in those early mornings. And that allows me to switch off and be fully present with Zeke. So I've actually used to just do it during the week, but now I do it on the weekend. So I'm naturally fully present for both Sheridan and Zeke. So I will still get up at 4 if I'm not going, and I won't go to the gym, but I will work for 4 hours before they get up. And it just allows me to be present, because you know how it is, both of you, is you might be out on the park pushing the swing and you're thinking about, oh, there's this deal I need to get over the line. Oh, there's this bit of work I haven't, and you're not being fully present. And I feel, how can I start developing these habits now of being present, rather than they get to a certain age and they realize he's here, but he's not really here, you know? Because we talk about this a lot, in particular in our community, of that you can have a parent that is there but isn't there, and that comes out later on in life, and that's something that I don't want to happen. And I don't even want to think about it being, oh, I've got time until they're 16, 17, 14, whatever the age might be, when they start to realize, if I start this habit now, it's going to be easier to continue it, you know? And I think that's the way I'm continuing to show up for both of them. And it's actually what Action Jackson said, we were in the same session, Steve, is how are you being the best person for the people that love you? Because actually we tend to think about being the best person for our clients, you know, our colleagues. But actually, if you think about it, is they're not going to remember those late nights you did. You won't even remember those late nights that you did. But I tell you what, who will remember when you wasn't there is your child. And I think that's just sat with me. And that, again, like people talk about this North Star. I look at things on my board and I say, what are my North Star that help guide me when I fall off track? Because it's going to happen. Life just happens.
Love that. Fill your cup up. Remember your why. What are your non-negotiables? That session, if anybody else was in it as well, it was a wonderful session. He even played guitar. Played it well and sang. If you haven't attended a session by Action Jackson,
we need to get Action Jackson booked on, don't we? I think it's in the pipeline, isn't it? Right?
Just going through the steps to get those dates confirmed. Ben's on holiday, and I'm terrible at confirming guests. So the mixture of all of that is absolutely. Ben gets 99.999.9 guests on, and I maybe do one or two. But it's a step away. And what we've been doing in this season, since it's been me and Ben, is going to the standard quick fire questions. So it might not be related to the topic that we've talked about, and not to move it away, but we're standing by we're doing 5 and mixing up, but we're gonna stick to these. So I'm gonna ask these questions as quickly as I can, and Ben will do it in alternate, and then try and answer them as quick as you can. Okay.
That's the nature of quick
Let's
fire
go.
questions, right, Steve?
Yeah, but to be fair, the reason I'm explaining it is no offense to Liv Spro. If you're now listening, we a guest that we've had on recently. She wasn't quick fire, so we none of us were. The quick fire questions ended up being 15 minutes, so it was our fault and Liz's. But anyway, okay, right. Future of exams.
Yeah, I think there's some. Wait, hold on. I think there needs to be some clarity on the quick fire questions. It's meant to be one word answers in the quick fire question.
Okay.
I'm not saying that. Don't start it from now. Don't start it from now, though. I'm just saying.
Okay, quick fire right now.
One sentence. We'll let you have one sentence, right?
Okay. Future of exams, online, traditional, scrapped.
I think online we need to be moving to a world that is reflecting the world they're going into. Young people are going into, and I hate saying that. The world that they're going when they leave. You get my point.
Yeah.
Okay.
2040. So 16 years away. Key skill. What's the key skill that you think young people are going to need? Students are going to need by 2040.
Comprehension. I love that. Both of you looking at me like, why?
No, it's quick fire. We stick to it. That's fine. Okay. Education in 50 years. What's your vision of it?
Oh, that's something good. I'm not being quick on that one. 50 years. It becomes equitable and everyone has access to top-notch education.
Love it. Yeah.
We'll leave it on quick fire. Love the last one. It's been an absolute pleasure as always, mate.
I love being on. Thank you for inviting me back on again, because I was like, am I going to get invited back onto their podcast? You know,
Always, mate. We always love having these conversations, and it's what we love is that you say before we went on air, we had a few. We're probably about half an hour chatting, didn't we? Right? Which we went, we probably should start recording a podcast now. And I love the fact that you challenge us and don't let things sit. Where you need to challenge, but also champion us. And there's interest there. There's 2 words there that sound very similar, that look very similar, but you challenge us and like champion us to become better people, better humans. And I watch you often from afar, and you're doing that not just for us, but you're doing it for others as well. But we appreciate you, mate, and we're grateful for all the wonderful work that you're doing, and we're doing the same. We're championing you from afar, and we challenge you to keep doing what you're doing. It's wonderful. So thank you for joining us again on the podcast, mate.
thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cheers, Lawrence.